Hello, viewers. Let's brew some delicious Korean rice wine. Today, you'll see a makgeolli and wheat flour experiment. This is going to be dry cooked wheat flour and wet cooked wheat flour. What will happen? Watch and see. I'll mention a bit of the history of wheat in makgeolli. I'll tell you what I brewed before with wheat flour. I'll talk a bit about food safety and the experiment itself. If you like this video, please click that like button and subscribe. Click the bell to be notified when I publish a new video on the subject of rustic Asian rice wine every week. And please share this video wherever it is appropriate. I really appreciate your help in spreading the word about this delicious rice wine. So let's read a bit about the history of makgeolli. Wheat flour has been used to make makgeolli in the past, in situations where there was a lack of rice due to famine, shortages of rice. It wasn't allowed to brew rice wine, and so wheat was substituted. But that was actually relatively recently. Around 1964 to 1971, that was the case, and also a few other times in the past as well. So naturally, drinkers of this time expected the wheat flavor in makgeolli, and to this day, some commercial makgeolli brewers use wheat flour in their brewing process today. Brewing with some wheat flour is a historical fact, even though it might not be really traditional. Last year, I brewed with raw wheat flour in this video, and in that particular recipe, I added a 1/4 cup raw wheat flour to the nuruk mixture in the first stage. So in that video, you can see that it fermented well and the flavor was smooth. However, that recipe used raw flour, and there are food safety issues with using raw flour. For example, that's the reason why you are not supposed to eat raw cookie dough. And even heat-treated flour hasn't been scientifically shown to protect against foodborne illnesses. You can see this article. There's links to everything I talk about in the description, so please check it out if you want more details. So even though I've read some food blogs about heat treating the flour up to 165 degrees, that temperature would be okay for wet cooking, but not necessarily for dry cooking. So I'm going to take that into account for this experiment. I'm going to try to brew with cooked rice flour in 2 ways. The first way, jar A, is wheat flour cooked in rice flour porridge. So that's wet cooked flour. In the second way, jar B, I'm going to try toasted wheat flour. So this is dry cooked wheat flour. So these are opposite ways of cooking. But unfortunately, this method for jar B is not scientifically proven to kill all the food pathogens. Still not necessarily safe, but I did it for a much higher temperature and for a longer period of time. I'm going to take that risk for the toasted wheat flour. I think that's going to be okay. So I'm going to give a spoiler here. Adding this wheat flour and cooking it in 2 different ways, it makes a bigger difference than you might think. So let's brew. We'll start off with jar A, which is wet cooked. That's juk with wheat flour. The juk is primarily made of rice flour. This is 200 grams of rice flour, 1 liter of water, and 2 tablespoons, which is about 18 grams of this wheat flour. And I'm making a porridge with this. And this happens to be bleached wheat flour, so white flour, but that's not necessary. Use the flour that you have. And I'm making this porridge. It's primarily rice flour, but there is some wheat flour in it for this recipe. And because it's wet cooked, we will know it's safe. It's going to come up to a boil here. That's going to be good enough to render this flour completely safe. It is cooked and the porridge is thick now. I'll set it aside to cool. I'll even use an ice bath to get this to cool a bit quicker, and I'll stir it occasionally. But as I'm waiting for it to cool, I'll get my Nuruk mixture ready. This is 90 grams of Nuruk, 100 milliliters of water, and some wine yeast, half a teaspoon of wine yeast. Stir that up, let that soak as I'm waiting for the jute to cool down. And I stir it occasionally, and yeah, now it's below 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. That's cool enough. I can add the Nuruk mixture into the jute and then carefully stir that. And I want to mix this for 15 minutes. This is actually quite strenuous because the jute starts off quite stiff and sticky. It is hard to mix up. After some time of mixing this, it should loosen up a bit and become more liquid. Because the purpose, well, one purpose of stirring this so much is to incorporate oxygen into the mixture that'll let the fermentation, the yeast reproduce faster, and the lactic acid bacteria will like that too. So we want a lot of stirring at the beginning. That's something we want. And as it gets more liquid, it's going to be easier to put into the jar. So this is the first stage of our brew here. And it's not really liquid, but it's soft enough so that I can scrape it into the jar. Okay, clean that up a bit. So keep the lid loose. That's important. It is not an airtight container. So now let's see what we're going to do with jar B. That's dry cooked. This is going to be toasted wheat flour. So to toast the wheat flour, I'm going to toast it in the oven on parchment paper. I'm going to fold up the edges so the flour doesn't spill out. And I'm just going to put 2 tablespoons in here, same amount, and spread it out evenly. And I'm going to toast it at 375 degrees for 10 minutes. And halfway through, I'm going to stir it around. So it's just very lightly toasted. The color has turned a bit yellow. So I'm going to let that cool, and I'm going to get the porridge ready. Again, 200 grams of the rice flour and a liter of water. And stir that continuously on medium heat until it thickens up. So there's no flour in this right now. It's just, this is all rice flour. This is a pure rice flour jute. I'm going to add the wheat flour, the toasted wheat flour. After it cools down, I'm going to add that to the Nuruk mixture. So we'll see what difference that makes. It might seem like just a small, subtle difference, but it actually affects, it does affect the taste. It's going to make a difference. So again, use an ice bath to cool this down and stir it every so often so it cools evenly. And as we're waiting, get the Nuruk mixture ready. Here's the wheat flour. I'm adding that to the 90 grams of Nuruk. Since it's toasted, it lost a bit of weight. And 100 milliliters of water, so otherwise, and the wine yeast. So this is otherwise the same as jar A, except that I've added the flour to the Nuruk instead of the jute. Okay, and again, once the jute is cooled down, add the Nuruk mixture and stir that for 15 minutes. And my hand is really tired. This is how I hurt my hand, getting a blister. So much mixing here. This is quite strenuous, but you got to do it to get a good brew. Gotta stir. This has to be evenly mixed. And again, it loosens up a bit, makes it easier to pour into the jar. So this is jar B, toasted flour, and put them both in the cabinet. And I should mention, why am I fermenting in the dark? It's because direct sunlight can interfere with fermentation. And secondly, even in an opaque jar, the sunlight causes temperature fluctuation, which could be even worse for the fermentation. So it is good to ferment in the dark. So the next day, day one, take a look. There's bubbles in both of these. So the fermentation has started. I listened to both of these. So there is bubbling. They do look a bit different on the top. I'm going to stir these twice a day for the first 2 days. They really have softened up a lot. It is important to stir them. Day two looks more even. They're both bubbly on the top, but especially jar B has more small bubbles on the top. Jar A is a bit thicker. It seems to be harder for the bubbles to escape. Now it's time for the second stage. So for both of these, I'm going to add 800 grams of rice. So that's 1.6 kilograms altogether. Wash that rice. So wash and rinse repeatedly. I'm going to make hard steamed rice, godubap, with this. This needs to be washed and soaked for some time, at least 3 hours. And 3 hours is perfectly fine, but just based on your schedule, overnight is also fine. Okay, so I'm just going to cover that and let it soak for 3 hours. And after the 3 hours, I'm going to drain this, maybe rinse it off with cold water here, and let it drain for 30 minutes. And we'll get the steamer ready. This is some wet cheesecloth, and the drained soak rice goes in there. Spread it out evenly. Fold the cloth over, and start timing as soon as the steam starts escaping the steamer. Start timing 40 minutes. Just the steam for 40 minutes, and then take it off the heat and carefully pull away the cloth. When the temperature is right, you can lift it up and spread it out. Let it cool. Now that the godubap has cooled to room temperature, we'll add it to the first stage. So the godubap is the second stage for these brews. We'll let the godubap cool down to room temperature and then divide the godubap evenly into the 2 jars. And use the scale to make sure it's even. Okay, it's time for the hand. Time to get this mixed up well. Hand taste is important. A is mixed up. Same for B. Get those grains of rice separated. Looking good. So back into the cabinet. And again, the lids are still loose. So let's look at day 3. Rice is breaking down. Lots of bubbles, especially in A. The bubbles seem to collect in A. And B seems to be a bit ahead in terms of fermentation, though. Now on day 6, they look pretty even. Day 7, yeah, even. Plenty of bubbles in both of them. The top of A does look a little drier or thicker. I like how B looks better. Day 9, yeah, it's a little, there's some kind of film on the surface of jar A. If it was really bad, I would stir it again, but it's okay. Everything smells good. These actually smell like apple as they are brewing. So that's interesting. Yeah, A is just a bit crusty on top. B looks normal to me. They're both fermenting away. There's a layer of liquid on the bottom, and then those grains of rice are going to fall down to the bottom. I hear slow but steady bubbling every time I listen. I'm going to be patient and let this ferment for a while. Temperatures are relatively cool in the house these days, so I'm going to give this some time to ferment. They both look like they're on the same schedule now. There's more and more. That liquid layer is larger than before, so it is worth waiting. Yeah, okay. Now it's day 22. Actually, looks like A is a bit ahead now in terms of those the liquid layer and fermentation. I'm going to bottle today. I'm going to boil my filter bag and stir up jar A. Get it ready for filtering. I'm going to tip it the whole thing over into the filter bag. Okay, looks good, and oh yeah, it's just ready to drip out. Going to need some squeezing, but it's actually relatively easy to filter this. This is working. Yeah, this is easy today. No problem there. And I'll put what all the liquid is filtered out. Beautiful milky color. The leftover, the jjigae, is 240 grams. I'm going to get my bonus bowl now. I'm going to put that jjigae back in the filter bag, add 100 milliliters of water, and really massage that, get the water in there. There's still a lot of flavor and alcohol left there. After filtering the second time, the jjigae, now it's only 201 grams. That means I got 39 grams of flavor out into the bonus bowl. So I think that's a good result. I like having the bonus bowl. It's an entire bowl that the brewer gets to consume on the day of filtering. So I do enjoy that. Now let's do jar B. Stir that up. Dump it into the filter bag again. Yeah, this is equally as easy to squeeze. Looking good. Got plenty of liquid out there. And this is our original alcohol, the wanju in those bottles. This is the jjigae, 248 grams. And it's time for the bonus bowl again. 100 milliliters of water. Squeeze that around again. Get that water in there and filter once again. Get all that good flavor out of here. So now the jjigae looks drier. Jjigae went from 248 grams to 196 grams. That meant for this one, I got 58 grams of flavor for the bonus bowl. Quite delicious. So let's compare the flavor here. These do taste quite different. They both have a have an apple flavor, but A seems more citric acid or has a sour aftertaste, is a bit sharper, whereas B has more of a grain flavor and astringent aftertaste and is a bit more mellow. But these could not be confused. They taste different. Just from cooking the wheat flour in two different ways, it affects the taste in this way. There's nothing wrong with either of these tastes. Right now, I prefer B, but we'll see because I always like waiting a few days and then tasting for real. So you're going to see that right now. Okay, it's been 3 days. Let's take a look at these brews. Notice they have not settled well, and especially A. So A is the wet cooked flour, the flour that was cooked with the juke, and B is the dry cooked flour, the flour that was toasted in the oven. And this is not a good amount of settling at all. It doesn't seem too thick in there, but it's just not settling. So that's interesting. And of course, I tasted these right after filtering, and they did taste different. So it's going to be interesting to see what they taste like now. Now should be the real taste. Hopefully, normally I hope it has a time to settle down. There's no carbonation in either of these, so I'm just going to pour these and taste. Okay, only the smallest amount of carbonation. Okay, just looking at it, it has some thickness. Smell is that a bit of a sour smell. It's the right kind of smell for makgeolli. Maybe a little more citric than lactic, though. Okay, this is quite tangy. Oh, it's not a bad taste, but it's quite tangy. It has reasonable flavor. This is pretty normal makgeolli flavor. The aftertaste is also a bit sour. So that's my first impression of A, which is the wet cooked flour. Now here's the toasted flour. Again, I'm just going to drink the Wanju here. See how this compares. Okay, much less of a sour smell. Still has a fairly sour flavor. I'm surprised how sour both of these turned out. It's in the range of acceptable makgeolli sourness, though. It's not extreme, but it's more than normal, I think. This has a bit more grain or rice flavor in it. Aftertaste is not as sour as the first one, but they did turn out rather similar. Both pretty sour and not willing to settle, even though there's no carbonation. So that's a interesting result. If you want, so next time, if I want something that will really settle and be good for Chongju, I would not add flour to it. The sourness is very bright and refreshing. Nothing wrong with the sourness, especially it might be good diluted with water, the normal amount. To your preference, that might cut down the sourness a bit. You could taste the makgeolli just a bit better, but yeah, that's the style here. So adding the flour produces a very bright and tangy brew. I think I prefer the toasted flour. I think that had a better flavor. And also, as I was brewing it, the top layer did look a little dry, and I think it got some sour flavors from that as well. I think there was some other growth going on, maybe a bit too much lactic acid bacteria activity. So the cooked flour in the juke, that's how that one turned out. Just a bit more sour than I would have liked. But I hope this is useful for your own brewing. Let me know what you've brewed with. Any interesting combinations, let me know in the comments. Thank you for joining me today and watching this video. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching.